Sophia strolled down the quiet hallway, a soft hum escaping her lips. Her father had given her a message to deliver to the chauffeur, and she was in no rush. As she reached the staff quarters, she grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open without knocking. She froze. Right before her, Daniel, the family's driver, emerged from the small bathroom, completely unclothed. The moment their eyes met, shock rippled through both of them. Sophia's breath hitched, and she instinctively raised a hand to her mouth. Daniel, his expression panicked, stood motionless, his face draining of color. I didn't know anyone was here, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. With urgency, he spun around, rushing back inside the bathroom. Moments later, he reappeared, a towel hastily wrapped around his waist. But Sophia hadn't moved an inch. She stood firm, her eyes locked onto him with an intensity that made Daniel uneasy. Breaking the silence, he cleared his throat. "Miss Sophia, please, you shouldn't be here." She didn't budge. Instead, she reached behind her and shut the door, the soft click echoing in the small room. Then, slowly, she stepped toward him. Daniel backed away instinctively, his hands slightly raised. "What are you doing?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. A slow smirk curled on Sophia's lips. "I want you," she murmured, her voice carrying a dangerous undertone. Daniel's chest tightened. He shook his head. "No, this is wrong. I'm engaged. And you're too young for this." His voice wavered, fear creeping in. Sophia's eyes darkened. "If you don't do what I ask, I'll tell my father you forced yourself on me." Daniel's stomach churned. "You wouldn't," he whispered, disbelief etched in his face. She only took another step forward, her gaze unwavering. Panic surged through him. Desperate, he raised his hands, gently pushing her away. "Stop this, Sophia. This isn't right." She stumbled back, but quickly steadied herself. Her face twisted into a scowl, rage flashing in her eyes. Without warning, she grabbed the front of her dress and yanked it, tearing the fabric apart. A blood-curdling scream erupted from her throat. "Help! Help! He's attacking me!" Daniel's world spun. "What are you doing?" he shouted, his voice laced with horror. "Stop lying." But she only screamed louder. Before he could react, the door burst open. Standing there was Mr. Carson, her father. His eyes blazed with fury as he took in the sight before him. His daughter, in a ripped dress, tears streaming down her face. And Daniel, half-dressed, standing over her. The air crackled with tension. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Carson's voice thundered through the room. Daniel stumbled backward, hands raised. "Sir, please. It's not what it looks like." Sophia threw herself into her father's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Daddy, he tried to hurt me," she gasped between heavy breaths. Mr. Carson's fists clenched. His entire body shook with fury. "How dare you?" he roared, stepping forward. "No, she's lying," Daniel protested, shaking his head desperately. "She walked in here, I swear." "Enough," Mr. Carson bellowed, his rage uncontainable. Daniel's heart shattered as he watched the man who had trusted him now look at him with pure disgust. "I took you in," Mr. Carson said, his voice raw. "I treated you like family. And this is how you repay me." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. "Sir, please. I didn't do anything." He dropped to his knees, pleading. But Sophia sobbed harder, burying her face in her father's chest. Mr. Carson didn't hesitate. He reached for his phone and dialed the police. Within minutes, sirens blared outside the mansion. "Take him away," Mr. Carson commanded when the officers arrived. "He attacked my daughter." Daniel was yanked to his feet, cold metal handcuffs snapping around his wrists. "I'm innocent," he cried out, struggling against the officers. "Please, listen to me." But no one did. Cameras flashed as reporters swarmed the police station. Billionaire chauffeur arrested for assaulting heiress blared across news outlets. When Emily, Daniel's fiancée, arrived, fury blazed in her eyes. The moment she saw him, she lashed out. "How could you?" Her best friend, Zoe, tried to calm her. "Emily, wait. Maybe there's more to this." But Emily wasn't hearing it. "Don't lie to me, Daniel. You ruined everything," she screamed. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. "Please, you have to believe me." "Never call me that again," she spat, turning away and storming out. Daniel collapsed against the cold jail walls, his heart breaking. Later that night, Mr. Carson arrived at the police station. Daniel wasted no time rushing to him. "Sir, please listen to me." His voice trembled with desperation. Mr. Carson hesitated. He was conflicted, unsure of what to believe. Finally, he took a step closer. "Speak." "Sir," Daniel began, his words frantic. "Your daughter, she's been after me for months. She keeps trying to get me to sleep with her. I always said no. She even trapped me in the hallway days ago. Today, she threatened me. She said she'd lie if I didn't do what she wanted. Please, you have to believe me." Mr. Carson's face remained unreadable, but the turmoil in his eyes was clear. "You're lying," he finally said, voice breaking. "I trusted you." Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing. "Please, I didn't do it." But Mr. Carson turned his back and walked away. Later that night, as he sat in his office, something gnawed at Mr. Carson. Something about Daniel's pleas lingered in his mind. His gut told him something wasn't right. With a deep breath, he unlocked a hidden drawer and pulled out his laptop. Unbeknownst to his family, he had installed security cameras throughout the house for protection. His hands trembled as he searched for the footage. Then he found it, and everything changed. Mr. Carson's hands trembled as he replayed the footage, his breath caught in his throat. The truth was undeniable. His own daughter had orchestrated the entire scene. The video showed Sophia stepping into Daniel's room uninvited, cornering him, and then tearing her own dress before screaming for help. His stomach churned. "I ruined an innocent man's life." By the time he rushed back to the police station, it was too late. The damage had been done. Daniel had already been convicted based on false testimony, and the media had branded him a predator. His fiancée had abandoned him. His reputation was in ruins, and worst of all, he had been sent to prison for a crime he never committed. And now, 3 years had passed. A black luxury car pulled up outside a towering corporate skyscraper. The driver stepped out, adjusted his expensive suit, and fixed his gaze on the massive building that read Carson Enterprises. Daniel was back. He was no longer the broken man who had been dragged away in handcuffs years ago. While in prison, he had made connections, studied law, and learned how the system worked. He had fought for his case, and when the hidden footage was finally exposed, the courts overturned his conviction. But by then, the damage was irreversible. His name had been tarnished, his loved ones gone. But Daniel hadn't returned for apologies. He had returned for justice. Inside the building, Mr. Carson sat at his desk, his face aged with regret. Sophia had been exposed, and the humiliation had crushed her. The once spoiled heiress was now a pariah, disowned by high society and left with nothing. Mr. Carson, despite everything, had tried to rebuild his life, but the guilt never left him. A knock at the door made him look up. The moment their eyes met, Mr. Carson's heart pounded. "Daniel, I know why you're here," Mr. Carson whispered. "And you deserve it." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady yet heavy with years of pain. "I don't want your money or your apology. I want the truth exposed." He placed a file on the desk, proof that would shatter everything. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And justice had finally arrived.